In this video, learn how we discuss specific reasons to sell for each play and how they are an important part of every playbook. Hi, I'm Jeff Holden, Head of Recruiting at S&B Capital, a proprietary trading firm located in Midtown Manhattan, trading equities, options, and futures as automated and discretionary traders. In this video, we talk through a playbook and discuss how having specific reasons to sell for each play in your playbook can help a trader improve their ability to execute on a setup they have identified as one of their top plays. Let's get to work on sharing this important trading lesson so you can grow.
Hello, my name is Yanni. This is a second day play that I did on AA. So the trade strategy is to find a stock with a positive ER catalyst. On day one, I wanted...
What's ER?
Oh, earnings, sorry.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, positive earnings catalyst, elevated R-vol on day one, ending near high of the day, and I define that as the top 80% of the range. I look for a break and hold of a key technical area to get long on day two. I also look for bounces off the 20-day moving average on the hourly. When it approaches that technical level, I want a sharp move away from that price when that level gets triggered. Ideally, the bigger picture in my favor. A big buyer on the tape within the first 5 minutes. I use the 5 and 10-day moving averages on the 1 hour as a guide for my trade. And I use the 20 and 50 EMA/SMA on the 5-minute as a trailing stop. I also use trend line bounces for managing my position. Ideally, I like to see some option flow with out-of-the-money strikes. When I'm scaling out, I look to take profit into resistance points, and the initial risk for this trade would just be low of the day. And if we end strong on day two, I look to swing for day three.
If you want to learn 3 more real-world setups that our traders use, including the simple setup that we teach all of our new traders, and the setup that turned one of our traders into a 7-figure big money earner, check out the free webinar that we're currently running. Just go ahead and click the link that should be appearing now at the top right-hand corner of your screen. That will open up the free registration page in a new window, so don't worry, you won't lose this video. You can also visit tradingworkshop.com to register for this free intensive workshop. You're going to learn more in a couple of hours from this trading workshop than from years of online education.
So my potential reasons to sell is if my price target is reached, and I use resistance points if a stock's at all-time high. In this case, I use the standard pivot points on the 5-minute. Against me, I use the intraday uptrend, right? Breaking news in the stock or in the overall market. If one of those moving averages I mentioned fails, if there's an unusual seller on the tape, that would be a reason to sell. If the daily Bollinger Band fails, if it opens outside it, if it's not holding that, that's a key support for me. Or if low of the day is breached.
This is really good. Do you have different reasons to sell for each of the different trades that you have, or are these just kind of general rules?
Well, yeah, these are just general rules for my system, I guess you could say.
Okay.
Not this specific trade, but...
Okay, so that's good. That's a really good place to start. Within that, there may be an opportunity to get more efficient with your exits as you get more comfortable with this trade by putting together custom reasons to sell for this exact trade, for this play for you. A lot of times when you are a little more systematic as a trader than most, so that might not be as applicable, but a lot of times you're going to want to create an environment or give yourself as much room as possible to allow the stock to work for you with the situation that's occurring. So I really like the fact that you have your potential reasons to sell and you review them every day. And now a next step might be, hey, it's an earnings name, so the breaking news in the stock is probably not going to happen. But, and if the intraday uptrend is broken, isn't this in theory a trend continuation play? So you're looking for the trend to come back and then it to continue, right? Or I'll pull in towards the trend and then continuation.
Yeah, if that trend fails, that's like one of my reasons to sell.
Yeah.
I guess. Yeah.
So you can define that in a lot of different ways. Moving averages failing is a similar thing. It's just showing that the trend is failing. Unusual seller on the tape is certainly probably on the lowest of time frames. As you get better at the different setups, you'll be able to figure out which of these criteria, a daily Bollinger Band failure, like we can go through it, but I'll need you to help me understand more how that's relevant to this trade. And low of day of breach, obviously that's, if this is a day two continuation play, if it fails to make, if it does make a new low, that's probably a pretty valid, this trade idea isn't working. So reasons to sell aren't just negative, they can also be positive too. I don't see any reasons to sell here. Do you cover that in the next slide maybe?
Well, my positive reasons to sell, if since this is at all-time highs, I just want to sell the trade into resistance, like sell into strength.
Oh, sell into strength. Okay,
Yeah.
That makes sense. I really like the idea of coming up with reasons to sell for every trade, whether it's before the trade or even when you enter the trade. They're gonna change for the most part, and but having a mapped out idea of this would get me to exit, this would get me to adjust. We just talked about D50. Jeez. We'll do this very quickly, but we're just talking about another stock that earlier in the day gave some reasons. It gave a really good reason to exit the long. That reason, if I use the same logic for exiting the long in that trade now versus the trade that was there before, I wouldn't be taking advantage of the opportunity there. So making sure you're putting together reasons to sell for this specific play could be an opportunity to grow your playbook quite significantly.
Yeah, that's something I could work on, because these reasons to sell is just a generalization of my trading, right? For this second day play, I think I could get a little bit more specific. So my trading plan, and I define this as an A+ trade, as there was a lot of variables for it. I'm gonna look for a $45 price bounce or buy into strength over 46.50. My stop will be 50 cents or the new low of the day, depending which comes first. I want to TP my core 50% into 47.
What's TP mean?
Take profit, sorry.
Take profit, okay.
Yeah, take profit 50% into 47. Leave runners for a reason to sell. So that could be trend line breaking, moving average failing, but I want this trade to work for me if this is a true trend continuation. And if we finish high of the day, I want to swing a minimum of 10% of my position into the third or fourth day. So this is a little back test on AA's earnings last few quarters. Something to note is that over the last 4 quarters, previous quarters, we've had a significant price increase within 2 weeks of after earnings. And our day 1 and 2 of the earnings is typically volatile. So that gives me a little bit of more confidence in this trade by just looking at this back test.
And how did you do the back test?
Yeah, so I use the third party for this. This is
Perfect.
a separate website, but
Perfect. But having a consistent process when you can back test anything, it's not going to be something that should give you a foolproof, oh, this is what's going to happen, but it can give you a sample of what you've looked at in the past. So that's great. And I like some of the categories that you put in here, because your drift open to close, you're basically writing out what is the candle potentially going to look like with the categories on your day of earnings. And I really think that that's pretty valuable, because then you're really defining it. A couple things that I notice is, the ranges are kind of interesting, but that's perfectly fine. And I like that you extrapolate it out as well, because you're certainly seeing a lot of the trade happen after that that earnings catalyst. So that's great.
So this is the bigger picture on SPY. We had SPY holding the 442 level, which was pretty bullish and kind of a confirmation of a new uptrend. QQQ needed to reclaim the 50-day moving average this day for me to have a little bit more confidence on technology sector being a little bit more strong. But seasonally, the S&P 500 has been bullish into October, November, and December. So when I see this pattern forming, then that is a big indicator in my favor. So this is the sector strength. I'm looking at XLE since this is kind of an aluminum company. So I want to look at energy and commodities. So XLE broke this little consolidation a few weeks ago and is in a strong uptrend. So we're in a strong overall market for this name. This is AA's technical analysis. So we have a nice strong uptrend and we're breaking out to all-time highs with elevated RVOL from our earnings report. Here's our hourly. I like to use a variety of moving averages. It pulled into this technical level, which lines up with the 20-day EMA. So that gave me confidence on taking the bounce there. And here's just our 5-minute chart. So the intraday fundamentals. So if you don't know, Alco is a vertically integrated aluminum company. They deal with just mixing alumina and refining. They continue to crush earnings. They had a pretty decent beat, nothing too crazy, but the revenue grew over 31% this quarter, which is pretty significant. They didn't offer specific earnings guidance, but they offered some hints. So that was positive as well. And for our intraday statistics, we had average daily volume is 8 million. Day 1 RVOL was 4.2. Day 2 was only 1.2. ATR is 2.75. Short float is 5%. Shares float almost 185 million. And this has a 79.5% institutional ownership.
And we talked about this in the meeting this morning with Dr. S. You know, is there a macro theme that's kind of supporting this move as well?
With energy specifically and commodities?
Yeah, with commodities.
I mean, we did talk with Dr. S a little bit about like how institutions have to chase into the end of the year.
Yeah.
And that kind of supports the seasonality theme as well.
Okay.
From the other back test. Also, I think there is slight fears of inflation not being transitory and some of the commodities reflecting that.
Yeah. So that's something that's kind of supporting this trade as well.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe not this trade in particular, but as a theme in the market.
So here are my variable checklists. There's a lot of checks in my favor from my trade strategy. The only things that didn't really hold up was that the 20 and 50-day moving average on the 5-minute didn't really hold. We didn't get any option flow that was significant. And I wasn't able to scale out into my first target, and we'll go over my execution in a second. But essentially, this did not meet the criteria for me to stay in a swing position, let alone take profit into 47. So here's my execution. I got long at 55.20, risking the low at about just a little bit under 55. And when that intraday uptrend broke at around 56, just even for a minute, I decided to exit the position as I didn't really think this was trading as cleanly as it did day 1.
You know, you're looking for 57 as your target, right?
Yeah.
And you had really good buys. It seems like you got was it a gap down into support or a quick flush into support?
Yeah, so that's what I wanted to show on the tape was
Okay.
when we opened, we kind of just gapped down and there wasn't any buying at all. And then that 3rd minute, we just saw a big buyer, almost half the volume on the day on one candle. And that's, once that offer lifted, I just got
Was
long
that the
there.
opening print or was it?
No, it was not the opening
Okay.
print. This was like 3-4 minutes into
Yeah,
the
so let's look at that. That's super interesting then. what you explained kind of gave you a lot of confidence in the trade in a setup you already had. So you were looking for a setup, it came to this level, you were watching the tape, you were getting ready to execute, and then you saw confirmation through what you needed to see on the tape in order to get involved.
Yeah.
It looked like the trade went in your favor very quickly as well. That kind of can be a great thing, and it can kind of make you think, oh, should I exit or how should I change my plan? Talk me through how you could have added, what could you have done differently in this trade? I think that those are important considerations if this is, kind of your A+ setup or one of your top setups.
Yeah, I mean, getting really good prices at that 55 level is really important, right? Risking low of the day, my risk is tight. I wasn't able to get as much size as I wanted to, but ideally, if we did see that same volume come in above like 56.50, which was another technical level on the hourly, then I could have added. It's not really my style to add into positions. Once I have good prices, I usually just stick with it and more picky with my exits. But what was a little bit frustrating, and I'll go over in the next slide my kind of trade review, but this did end up trading to my target, but since my reasons to sell were maybe a little bit too tight, that this intraday trend line did break for a second. If we could just draw like a trend line from this low connecting these higher lows, like I did technically had to stop out there, right? So that's kind of frustrating that I got stopped out and it did trade to that 57 target. Trade review, this trade met my criteria for a day 2 play. Had a big beat on earnings, breaking all-time high with some short interest on my side with a hot sector and a strong chart. I expected this name to trade more strong, but ended up using my reasons to sell to get out when a shorter time frame trend line looked like it was breaking down. In real time, I noticed that it did not really trade clean for a day 2. Volume somewhat dried up after that initial buyer and did not have the characteristics of the type of trade that I would want, right? I gave room for the trade to work, but I'd much rather take what I could get than give back a green trade, right? And the consequences of that trade was it was a 1 hour win, right? I took no drawdown on it. My best exit could have been 2.5 R, but overall, if I was a coach and talking myself through this trade again, I would say that this trade could have set up big, right? Taking a 1 hour win was still a win, right? And could set up big, but did not really meet the variables in real time for me to stay in this idea. Even though it did trade to my level, at the end of the day, I'm still happy with it because in the long run, if I still use my reasons to sell, my R values will still be positive, right? But that's kind of my thought process through this trade.
It's interesting because I like the entire process that you're using to study your trade. That's very good. Where you might be able to grow quickly is by customizing reasons to sell for an A+ setup like this. What I saw in the chart is what you kind of want to see. You want to see the initial thrust, you want to see a pullback, and then you want to see continuation. And for a lot of traders, the initial thrust is somewhat, not confirmation, but gives you a little confidence in the trade. And so you're inviting that pullback a little bit and probably a little looser with the way that you're trading that second leg because you've already got that initial thrust. Mm-hmm. There are times when it'll just fail and go against you and take your stop. But if you take the time to go through each of your setups, particularly your A setups, and define really good reasons to sell for those, would it be a hold below a support level from the prior day? If price action on a day 2 is holding below a prior day support level, then in theory, you're probably not putting yourself in a great position. If you're using 2-day VWAP, a hold below 2-day VWAP could be another reason to exit some of your position. A hold below 1 day VWAP could be a reason to exit your position in this situation. You want to make sure you're giving yourself as much of an opportunity to realize the trade you're trying to make as possible, while also managing your risk. Because if it would have gone to your target, what was your risk reward on that? What would your R have been if it would have gone to your target?
Yeah, it would have been almost 3, like 2.5.
Yeah, so it's a huge difference between 2.5 and 1. 1 is still good, 2.5 is much better.
Of course, yeah.
So defining your reasons to sell for that exact play or that exact setup can be a valuable exercise, because the way that most of us trade intraday, you're going to have a variety of reasons to sell in different circumstances. And you've outlined some really good ones in your reason to sell, but you could probably do better by being a little more specific about those for this setup, especially if this is going to be one of your A+ setups. As you grow and evolve, your entry criteria will change in that setup. The way you manage your risk will probably change a little bit in that setup. But your reasons to sell, you want to make sure that those are specific to that setup. The more you can do that, the more opportunity to realize that full profit you'll probably give yourself. The stock is going to do what it's going to do. There are going to be times that trade doesn't work. There are going to be times that you're watching that trade and it doesn't give you the entry signal. But when it does work, you really want to figure out, how could I have been involved all the way through that? And the playbook exercise is just an opportunity to do that. It's to relive, how could I have done this? How could I have done this specifically in this setup? How could I have done this specifically on this play? So you're not just saying every time we break a moving average, I'm going to be exiting my position, because in a situation like this on day 2, you're going to have times when it chops around. Unless you've really done the back tests to study, it will never ever touch that level. You want to make sure you're giving yourself enough room to allow for success.
And that's interesting you bring up like back testing. I haven't done like super specific back tests on what you're saying, but I know from an intuitive standpoint that these day 2s are my best setups, and I almost give it like a time stop where this trade has to be working quick throughout the open, because I see in my statistics on TraderView that the longer these trades take, the less likely it is for it to work.
So I like that point. And I'm gonna challenge you here, because, and I'm not disagreeing, I'm just challenging you. In my mind, that trade worked. As soon as you entered it and it ripped up, that trade was a working trade. That's very different than a trade where it's not working, it's against you, and there's a time stop there. So it'd be interesting, you could take it a little further and you could say, in the money versus out of the money. You could take it further and say, I'm not gonna, I'll move my stop to break even, but I'll allow the trade to do what it's going to do, or I'll move my stop up and allow the trade to do what it's going to do. You've got a lot of potential with this setup, and you've got a lot of opportunity to clean it up a little bit. And if it is your A+ setup, which is great, because there are traders on the desk who have made day 2s what they do, and they'll study each day 1 after the close of an earnings, and they'll really focus on what would give me opportunity in this name today, and they'll execute the way you executed, and their reasons to sell will be customized to that setup, and then they'll be able to kind of make that one really good trade through the day, and that's it.
Yeah.
So you have a lot of potential of where you could go on this, and I'd like to see you challenge yourself to not just look at it as, what are my broad reasons to sell, but what are your reasons to sell for this exact trade? And if you've been tagging them, you can go through and you can change your reasons to sell that were presented on that sheet to, what are my reasons to sell for an strong earnings day 2? And you can probably be wrong a couple times. But hopefully over the course of 30 days, a month, 2 earning cycles, whatever, you're starting to realize better returns by just putting together specific reasons to sell for that trade.
Yeah, makes sense. Thank you for that.
The reasons to sell, I love what you're doing, because the reasons to sell, most people don't really do the work to figure out what are the real reasons to sell. And then they're selling some 30 cents in the money because they're 30 cents in the money. Or they're selling some back to the open because they're back to the open. They're not really saying, what are my real reasons to get out of this trade? Whether the trade works for me, what are my reasons there? If the trade doesn't work for me, what are my reasons there? The time stop is a perfect example of that's a reason to sell in this trade. If the trade is not working for you, so it's against you, right? After 5 minutes, after 15 minutes, after 30 minutes, whatever your definition is, that's a great reason to sell, because that's protecting your risk. You know that if the trade is not working for you, you have a really good reason to sell. And you can have a lot of confidence in that of if the price action's down and just messing around and it's been that time limit, you're like, I'm done. If the trade works for you and then starts doing that consolidation thing, but you could have a time limit there too. You could say, okay, now I need to see the move up happen in the next hour. That could be another consideration. There are all these little considerations that you can use, but that's the process of getting better at a specific setup, is by considering all those little steps. And your reasons to sell are something a lot of people overlook, but they're more valuable than you think.
Thank you for that, and I'll definitely challenge myself and be more specific with this setup.
Hey, go ahead and click our subscribe button so you don't miss any of the videos that we're producing for you in the trading community. And please take the time to add your feedback in the comments section for what videos you'd like for us to produce next and what you found helpful from this video. From all of us at S&B, train and trade well.